Hey there, DB teachers. I am excited to share some things with you that I hope will be helpful. I hope that everyone has had a couple of days off to enjoy and to be healthy. Um, Usually when I share things with you, I do like to have things scripted a little bit more than I will tonight. And so maybe that's just a model for you guys that things won't be perfect. And we're just going to tackle this distance teaching and learning. And you guys will bring the same commitment and dedication that you do every day in the classrooms, and you will be successful with all of this. One thing that I'll say is that with distance teaching and learning and these things that I'm going to be sharing with you, we need to make sure that we're mindful of the things that are within our control and the things that are outside of our control. So the things that I'm going to be sharing with you are things that I hope are more within our control. There are going to be situations where students may not have access to internet. They might not be able to access these things that you're going to be creating for them, but there are going to be some students who are, and so we want to be able to make sure that they're getting the very best. Also, the things that I'm sharing, hopefully they will be applicable in other situations. For instance, cases where maybe we don't have school because of snow, maybe when students are out on field trips during the testing season. I know typically students get pulled for making up tests or testing across other classes. And so maybe some of these are ideas that you can implement in your classrooms, especially when those times come up and you might need some distance learning or some remote learning for those students. We have potential to improve our instruction even when we return to face-to-face business as usual with these students. So hopefully you can get some things out of this. You will be getting a link via email to add yourself to this Canvas course. And I'm just going to walk through this quickly with you and share some of the resources, just some highlights, but you will go through these on your own. Whenever you join the Canvas course, you will come to this modules page first, and I have it labeled for you, Start Here, Overview Videos. So whenever you first log on, you will select this first option in the module for overview videos. There's a note that says to watch these videos first. Now this video that I am currently recording is going to be here on top. And then below that, this was just a great little video that someone shared, 5 ways to teach online in an emergency situation. And so some of this is reiterated throughout, but it's a quick little watch. I will share one tip for you that whenever you're watching whenever you're watching a YouTube video, you can always go to this settings tab and playback speed. You can adjust it so that things play at 1.5 times speed or twice the speed. That helps you get through, and typically you can get through videos just fine unless someone naturally just speaks more quickly. So you have that option for any YouTube video, as I do have a few of those shared. So you'll start here and watch these videos. In the bottom right corner, there's a Next button. And this just takes you to a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today and what all is included in this site. So we're going to talk about expectations for teachers, for students, and for families. We're going to go over some best practices, and that's going to include tips and tricks, communication, lesson planning, feedback, and accountability. And lastly, some videos and resources, which will include things specifically for Canvas and Google Classroom. Also, this was a big topic that many people asked about, was how to make their own videos. So I think you will find this portion helpful. Assessment resources. Also, in the survey that I sent out, the second most requested thing was about how to collaborate in a digital class environment. And so I made sure to include a few options here for collaboration. And then there are also some additional tools and resources as well. We're going to click on the Next button again. And you'll see on this page, this is the expectations page. So I do want to touch on a couple of these things very quickly. Just some of these big ones. The very first thing, and I know that Dr. Hampton has stressed this also, is that when we're doing online learning, we are not trying to mimic an actual school day. That's just not going to be realistic. So among these other things, I'm not going to read them all to you, but among these other things, one thing that I will touch on is lessening the workload, making sure that we're hitting our focus standards and not trying to feel like we have to fill this time for students, because many of them do have other expectations within their families, taking care of younger siblings and that sort of thing. Now, one thing that I want to point out is I did try to condense. So instead of always having to go next, next, next through all of these pages, I wanted to give you short chunks of information. So here's for teachers. Notice each of these next pages, there's one tab for students and there's one tab for families. So these are just ideas. For instance, with students, one thing for them is going to be that they should be checking their student email daily for updates and communication if possible. Again, remember we talked about things that are within and then outside of our control. But there were some students who, if this is the expectation that's set, they will do those things. Just some other things here about how things aren't optional, setting days and times, academic integrity, and using chatting and conferencing tools appropriately. For families, it's very important for them to know how to communicate with you. One thing that I've stressed throughout this is that for parents to communicate with teachers, they need to go through their K-12K email accounts, not Facebook or other social media. So I think that's been mentioned in Dr. Hampton's email as well. And so hopefully that's something that from a district level may be passed along to parents so that they can understand that. So this is the expectations page. Going to the next page. These are our best practices in distance teaching and learning. We are all new to this, at least in some ways, and so I think it's just helpful to have some good ideas and some go-to information. So for the tips and tricks, you again will be able to read through all of these things. At the bottom, I do want to point out, just because I thought that this was an interesting piece, that this is a chart for doing distance learning with students and their needs. So phase 1, they call it the guiding phase, and it's weeks 0 through 3. We can see that there's information here about the relational support that students are needing. That's kind of the motivation is a piece of that. Making sure that they're feeling connected with by the teacher and with their peers. And then this pink line is the academic and technical support line. So just to spell this out a little bit further, in this first phase, in those first 3 weeks of distance learning, students really need a lot when it comes to academic and technical support. Now at this point in the semester, students, of course, they'll still need some academic support, but in this case, with these new modalities, they're really going to need a lot of technical support. So one thing I try and stress is to make sure that everything that you're asking students to do online, they do know how to do those things online. And so making sure you're giving tutorials and just being very clear about those expectations. So on this page, there's the tips and tricks. There's communication. One thing that I do want to point out is that from everything that I have come together, that I've put together, I know motivation was another question that teachers had a lot about how do we get kids motivated to do the work. The thing that they say is the most important with any distance learning is to make sure to respond to all student and parent communication within 24 hours during weekdays when you receive information. So that's going to be a big piece of that. There are some other ideas here about setting times for yourself that you can respond to email, making sure that your students know that those are your virtual office hours. You might even want to set up whole class optional meetings once things get a little bit farther along, if there's a need for that. And then one note on here that I thought was really wise that one district shared was if you're meeting with students one-on-one, that they record those meetings. That's a requirement from a different district, not in the state of Tennessee. And so I do have little notes in cases like this where I have some directions for how you would record on a Google Hangout if you were to meet with students one-on-one in a virtual setting, though I would imagine that email will probably suffice, but that's just something if you were compelled to have virtual meetings with students, make sure that you are being smart about that. Lesson planning is the next tab. A couple of things I want to point out on this is as you are designing lessons, just like you would in a good classroom lesson, you want to be smart about it and give instruction, give an opportunity for practice, give some sort of assessment or opportunity for students to show you what they know, and then give feedback to students. Feedback is very important, and I should have said that with communication, it's not only about responding to emails, but also getting information back to students in a timely manner. Another point that I saw that I liked was not sharing a Google or PowerPoint presentation, a Google Slides rather, or PowerPoint presentation, and just expecting students to go through it. That you get much better payback from your students if you narrate your slides. And so in the resources section, I do have that section of make your own video, and you could certainly use those resources there. There's a feedback section, and I tried to keep these again very short with just some good ideas. One thing that stands out on this one is including students' names whenever you leave comments on their work. If you're doing something in a Google Doc, just adding that personal touch to things. And then lastly, accountability. This is another thing that teachers were concerned about in the survey. One important thing that I would direct your attention to is if you do assessments through Google Forms, that Google Forms has recently added a way for you to lock that tab so students either they can't access other tabs or they can and you are notified that they've accessed extra tabs. So I put directions whenever there was something like that. There are directions here that will give you a direct link to different information. I did also include, this is one video that I would highly, highly recommend if you use Google Slides in your classroom, or if you're assigning tasks that you do want to make sure that kids have some opportunities to share their thinking and their learning. This is a great, I think like an 8 or so minute video for that. And then this last tab is videos and resources. So there's a tab just for Canvas. So if you are getting started with Canvas, there are videos or tutorials. Tutorials are usually step-by-step instructions that I've included that I didn't create myself, but I found some really great sources for you guys. Again, with Google Classroom, if you are just getting started with Google Classroom, there's an intro and just a couple of points with that. If that's something that needs to be built out farther, I'm certainly happy to add those things later. This section I expect to be something that teachers are interested in about how to make videos. So it uses Screencastify. Another that I didn't include but I'm using myself right now is screencastomatic.com. Very similar, and I can certainly add links to that later. It talks about how to, if you're wanting to work, say, math problems on your document camera, here, these two combined are going to give you what you need to be able to do that. I have notes about recording straight to Google Classroom from your phone or device, as well as for Canvas, and then how to upload videos on YouTube if that's the platform that you decide to use. There are lots of different options for how to do this, but this should certainly get you started. Then I have some assessment resources specifically for Google Classroom, for Canvas, and for Quiz. I have some collaboration resources. This is another piece that Canvas has built in that I would highly recommend for conferencing, much like a Google Hangout, and there's information there and a couple more resources. And then lastly, additional tools and resources. A note on this one, BrainPop, as well as iExcel, and I was thinking there was one more, but maybe not, are offering free resources through the end of this school year with all of the excitement that has been going on. And then the last section is this Google Doc. And so what I would like, you might have to authorize it, and there's a link here as well. And so what it's going to do is it's just going to open up a Google Doc where it has room for additional ideas or resources that you would like to share with other teachers that you might find helpful. And then there's also a section underneath for you to put in questions, and then for those questions that could be answered right beside it that might benefit everyone. So I hope that this finds all of you well and that you are prepared. If there's anything that I can do to help you in the next few days to get ready for making these adjustments and these changes, I'm certainly happy to do so. And please email me and let me know.